What's up guys, welcome back to another festive content advent calendar video. Thank you once again for joining me at this lovely festive time of year. It's really grey outside, so we're not going to go out. I was going to go out and do a bunch of stuff, time lapse, all this kind of stuff, but it's just endlessly grey and miserable. So instead, we're going to talk about 5 things I wish I knew when I started photography. And if you're watching this and you're a new photographer, this is absolutely something I wish I had been able to tell myself at the time of things that did matter and didn't matter. And of course, if you have any of your own tips, things you wish you'd known when you first started out, pop them down in the comments because we can all help each other out, especially if there's some new photographers watching. So the first thing I wish I knew when I first started photography was to just learn manual mode pretty much as quickly as possible. Just get that in the bag, get that knowledge in. I shot on auto and there's a bunch of photos that I did that I just look back now and I think, if only I was shooting in manual mode, I could have done things differently. I actually went and did kind of client shoots in auto. Not what you want. So I wish that I'd learned manual as kind of early as I possibly could, because it's not that you always have to shoot in manual, but then you've got the option not to, or whether you want to, you can shoot shutter priority, aperture priority, whatever it is you want to do. Auto ISO I now shoot pretty much all the time unless there's something specific I want to do, just because it's a little bit easier. But knowing how to shoot manual really opens up those options for what you want to do. And the same thing applies to shooting in RAW, right? Shooting RAW changed the way I approached photography, and especially obviously my editing. And just shooting in RAW as early as possible really would just have helped me out with a lot of different things. You don't always have to shoot in RAW. You can still choose to shoot in JPEG if you want. But having that option, knowing why you might pick one or the other, that would have just sped things up massively for me and would have avoided a couple of slightly less than ideal shoots that I actually did for clients. They were very nice about it. They were very nice about it. But, you know, I was learning and it would have been ideal if I'd sped up the manual process a little bit faster. The second thing I wish that I'd known when I first started photography, and I think this is probably true for a huge number of us, depth of field isn't everything, and shooting wide open isn't always even the best way to achieve the depth of field look that you're going for. Shooting wide open, you know, when you get your first nifty 50 and it goes to f1.8 and you never shoot anything but f1.8, is not always the best idea. It tends not to be the sharpest results or even necessarily the look you wanted to go for. And, you know, you get too close to things, you get out of focus parts of the image that aren't supposed to be out of focus. And there's a lot of other ways to get a nice shallow depth of field without having to just shoot as wide open as possible, getting close up, all that kind of stuff. So for example, using a zoom lens, you know, a kit lens. When I eventually worked out that the kit lens that my camera came with, I was able to zoom all the way to, I think it was 135 millimeters. And even though it's f5.6, I'd still get a blurred background because of the compression and all that kind of stuff. And that sometimes looked better than my nifty 50 at f1.8. That was kind of a moment that changed things. And really, that I think is such a trap we all fall into, is just, oh yeah, shallow depth of field. Every portrait has to be shallow depth of field. Every portrait has to be as wide open as possible. That's just not the case. Sometimes also you want to be thinking about what you want to be in focus in the shot. Yes, a shallow depth of field can look really nice, but you might want a bit more of that environment in focus. You might want it to be a little bit less blurred, so there's a bit of context about where your subject is. Or if you're shooting product photography or whatever it is, you want to make sure it's not too soft and too shallow, because it just doesn't look great. It kind of looks a bit amateurish because it looks like you don't know what you're doing and you're just shooting wide open, which of course is exactly what you're doing. The third thing that I wish I'd known is just how much more important composition and lighting are than the gear you have. It's not that the gear you have isn't important, and obviously it plays a big role in the kind of stuff you're able to capture. So for example, if you want to be a wildlife photographer, you're going to need a longer lens. But I was so hung up on the idea that I needed a really good camera, and the one that I was kind of lusting for was the 5D Mark IV, the Canon 5D Mark IV, and I never ended up buying that camera. And I had much more basic cameras, and I always thought if I just had a better camera, I'd be able to take better photos. It's just not true. That's not how it works at all. And composition and lighting in particular are so much more important than the gear you have. And it took me a long time to really work out just how much of a big deal lighting is. It's just everything. It's just the whole thing. Sharpness, color, you know, clarity, contrast, it's all dictated by lighting. It's such a massive part of photography, whether it's natural light or you're using a light like I'm using right now myself. And compared to that, you can have the best camera in the world, the best lens in the world, but if you don't have the right composition, you're not treating the light in the right kind of way, the photos are just not going to come out very good. So that is something that took me a long time to properly grasp, but I wish I'd known. Composition, lighting, the most important parts. The fourth thing I wish I knew when I first started with photography was absolutely learn from the greats. You can try and emulate certain styles or try and emulate certain looks and things like that and compositions and learn from them, but don't compare yourself to them because it's going to be unbelievably unfair and just you're never going to live up to it in your own mind. And a big part of that is, if you're just starting out, if you're comparing yourself to, Instagram users who you love, big like Peter McKinnon and stuff like that, or famous photographers, you're looking at their websites, you're looking at their work in galleries and stuff like that. If you just started out, there's no way you're going to be on that level. And it would be crazy if you were, because imagine if it was that easy to just be that good. Right? Everyone would do it. Everyone would be just the best photographer you've ever seen. So don't compare yourself, because these guys have been doing it for like years or decades even maybe, and it's just not fair to compare yourself on that kind of level when you're just starting out. Learn from it. Absolutely. Color grading, composition, lighting, all this kind of stuff. What works, what you like, what you don't like. Emulate it. That was something I did to kind of learn a bit of photography, was try and take similar looking shots, because then I could learn how they did that. Then I could apply those learnings to other photos. But don't compare yourself, because you're never going to win that race. And you shouldn't even be entering into that competition. That's just ridiculous. So don't compare yourself. You are your own photographer. And that's fine. That's great. You don't want to be Peter McKinnon because there's already a Peter McKinnon out there, right? You want to be yourself. And that I wish I'd fully understood and known that when I first started. The last thing that I wish I'd known at the beginning of my photography kind of career was to just make editing as easy for yourself as possible when you're taking the shot. Now there's loads of parts to this. That means moving to the right kind of spot, even if it's just a few centimeters, a few inches to the right or the left, moving forward instead of having to crop later, trying to get the composition basically spot on, but also little things like removing elements from the frame that you don't want to be in there. So if there's literally just rubbish lying on the ground, take that out of the shot. You don't want that in there. You're going to have to Photoshop it out or something ridiculous later. Make it easier for yourself. If you're shooting portraits of a model or something like that, I used to do this with Matilda a lot. If the wind has blown her hair into her face, just get her to move it out of her face so you don't have to later spend ages trying to Photoshop bits of hair out of her face or whatever it is. Just make editing as easy for yourself as possible. The less you have to do in the edit, the better. And then if you want to do lots of creative styles and color grading and all that kinds of stuff, that's great. Absolutely go for it. Experiment, see what you like, develop your own kind of style. But if you're having to clean up after yourself because you didn't do enough of the kind of production work when you were taking the shot, that's not ideal. So just make it as easy for yourself as you possibly can. So those are 5 things I wish I'd known when I first started my photography career, but I'd love to know any more that you wish you'd known when you first started out. Maybe we can help some new photographers. Maybe we can all share a laugh about things that were super important back then, but just you realize don't matter at all. I mean, do you remember just color grading things so that skin tones were just wiped out and just not good? Was that just me? Was that just me? I took photos for friends and stuff, and I did that. Shame. Of course, there's a list of all the kit used for all the photos in this video and everything else down in the description, so you can check that out for yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I will, of course, see you tomorrow for another video in our Content Advent Calendar series. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.